Welcome to the online worship of Chalice Unitarian Universalist Congregation. We are a community of diverse beliefs and experiences, nurturing the liberal religious spirit and united by our desire to grow in love and in service. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your life's journey, you are welcome here. Whether you gather with us every Sunday, once or twice a year, or are with us this morning for the very first time, we are so glad you're here. I'm Reverend Sharon Wiley, the minister at Chalice. Our worship musician this morning is Justin Gray, and our song leaders are many. You'll see the names on the screens. Welcome to this online worship service. If you are new to online worship, a quick orientation. We cannot see you, we cannot hear you, and that will not change during this service. So you can't turn yourself on or make yourself visible. So relax, relax and enjoy. If you get a notice that pops up during the service that says internet unstable, that means that your internet is unstable. So if you have multiple devices on in your house, you might check and move some of them to airplane mode and see if that helps free up your internet connection for the service. On your menu, your Zoom menu, there's a button that says chat. For most of you, that's the menu is along the bottom of your screen. And this is where we chat with each other during the service. You'll see that people are saying hello and greeting each other in the chat box right now. So some congregants love the chat function and use it during the service, which you're welcome to do. Other congregants don't like the chat box and find it distracting. You do not have to have the chat box open. And so if it has popped open, know that you can just press that chat button on your menu and that will close it back down. So clicking on chat on your menu opens it and closes it. For those of you who do like to use the chat, please make sure you use that little blue menu to select not just panelists, but all panelists and attendees. And that's how we make sure that everybody can participate in the conversation. I'm the only panelist and may not see your comment during the service because there's a lot going on. So please post to all of us. So this is me greeting you, standing on the courtyard, the sun shining. Since I can't hug you myself, go ahead and give yourself a hug. If you share living space with other people, this might be a time to give them a hug. Good morning. Now I want to say a special welcome to our newcomers at Chalice. In addition to this online worship, I want you to know that many of our groups and activities continue to happen online as well. Activities like our women's book club, men's breakfast group, support groups, religious education for children, all of these are happening online and more. You don't have to be a member to participate in our groups and activities. They're open to everyone. So if you are new and would like to learn more about these activities and how to get on our email list so you can participate, you're invited to stay in this Zoom room after the worship service for our newcomer chat. I will be there, a board member, and a couple of our greeters to answer your questions. So let's take a breath together. Our service today invites us to reflect on everything that's changing. The words of our call to worship come from the Reverend Christian Schmidt. Let us wake up, not just from the Sunday morning exhaustion, from the wish for a few more drowsy minutes in bed. Let us wake up to this world we live in, to its beauty and wonder, and also to its tragedy and pain. We must wake up to this reality, that not all in our world have what we do, however much or little that is. We must wake up to the idea that our wholeness, our lives, are only as complete as the lives of those around us, of those we are inextricably tied to in a great web of mutuality, of which all of us are a part. We must stay woke, in the words of our friends and colleagues involved in Black Lives Matter, working every day for racial justice in our country. Let us wake up, let us stay awake, let us stay woke. And now let us worship together. You're invited to join in singing.
Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Mystery, what are we? Life is a riddle and a mystery.
If you have a sorrow or worry you would like to share with the community this morning, this is a time to share it with each other in the chat box. These aren't spoken or shared out loud, but please respond to each other in the chat. And this is the time for our sorrows and worries, and we'll share joys a bit later in the service. So we'll listen to some music, and if you have a candle in your home that you would like to light for sorrow, please do so. May our sorrows be lessened. May our burdens be lightened. In sorrow and challenge, may we know ourselves always held and never alone. May we act to extend our warmth to all who are hurting in our wider world.
My name's Jelani Memory, and this is a kid's book about racism. This is a book about racism, for reals, and yes, it really is for kids. It's a good book to read with a grown-up, because you'll have lots to talk about afterward. Just you, keep reading. The book won't bite. Now to introduce myself. My name is Jelani. My skin color looks like this. If you're colorblind, this is the color brown. Because my dad is black and my mom is white, which makes me mixed. Or African American, biracial, black, or a person of color. I'm proud of who I am and the color of my skin, but because of my skin color, people aren't always nice to me. Sometimes I get called names. Other times, it's worse. The person doing it might not even realize that it hurts me a lot. And when they treat me that way, it makes me feel small. You see, some people believe that having different color skin means you aren't as good as others. That's called racism. What is racism? Racism means to hate someone, exclude them, or treat them badly because of their race or the color of their skin. And it happens all the time. Not just in big ways, but sometimes it shows up in small ways, ways that are almost invisible. Like a look, a comment, a question, a thought, a joke, a word, or a belief. Racism is one of the worst kinds of mean someone can be, because racism thinks being different is bad. But being different is actually good. Like really, 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 almost there, I promise. Really, 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 really good. 1000% good. Because being different means we have so much more to offer each other. Things like help, ideas, strength, skills, creativity, life, patience, respect, community, love, knowledge, experience, perspective, insight, diversity, wisdom, empathy, and originality. That whole being different thing, it makes us better, much better. So if you see someone being treated badly, made fun of, excluded from playing, or looked down on because of their skin color, call it racism.
So I wanted to choose a sermon topic at our most recent chalice auction. I chose baseball. I was thinking of themes like the rebirth of spring and hope, generational connections, father to me, to son, to grandson, inheritance of rooting interest, Red Sox. Playing experiences and nostalgic reminders of youth and the past. Continuity and steadiness in a changing world. Today, these themes don't seem to have the same saliency in a post-COVID and post-George Floyd world. I question whether these same comforts that I expressed about baseball are too much a part of the white privilege I have grown up with. Major League Baseball has long been an explicitly racist organization. And since Jackie Robinson was allowed to play, an implicitly racist organization. Quick aside, I grew up a Red Sox fan, not knowing until adulthood that the Red Sox had the rights to players from the Birmingham Black Barons of the Negro Professional League in the early 50s. They chose not to sign any of those players. Indeed, the Red Sox were the last team to field a black player, waiting until the late 50s. If their owner, Tom Yawkey, hadn't been a racist, I would have been watching Red Sox teams in the 50s with center fielder Willie Mays from the Black Barons playing alongside Ted Williams. Today, baseball is still an overwhelmingly white sport, dominated by old-school players and coaches that insist the game be played the right way, excluding the culture and expressiveness that many people of color have grown up with. Having recently read Howard Bryant's book, Full Dissidence, I find myself increasingly bothered by Major League Baseball and the Padres in particular. Their promotion of militarism and propaganda that creates a hero worship culture of warriors and police, inhibiting reasoned discussion of alternative points of view. The exclamation point to this is the faux patriotic rendition of God Bless America sung every Sunday. I now concede that all of my inheritances were rooted in past white privilege, allowing my parents and grandparents to acquire a lifestyle and traditions that they were able to bequeath to me. Even hope now seems a troublesome concept when faced with the reality of the historical basis and current reliance of our country and culture on racial inequity and oppression. Over to you, Reverend Sharon.
Thanks, Jim. When Donald Trump was elected in 2016, I remember feeling surprised that someone so openly racist could be elected president of the United States. The past almost 4 years has been a painful and too slow realization that his open racism is why he was elected president. I didn't know that white supremacists really existed. I didn't know there were Nazis in the United States. And although I knew with certainty that things would be bad during a Trump presidency, like most of us, I could not and did not imagine how bad. It will always, always be embarrassing and painful that it took the Trump presidency for me and many people like me, people of privilege, living in a progressive bubble. It will always be embarrassing and painful that it took the Trump presidency for so many of us white people especially, to see that racism is and has always been a defining characteristic of our country. Historian Ibram X. Kendi has a piece in the September issue of the Atlantic magazine. And in it he asks, is this the beginning of the end of American racism? He argues that we are living in the midst of an anti-racist revolution that corresponds with Trump's political career. Kendi notes, Trump held up a mirror to American society, and it reflected back a grotesque image that many had refused to see. We are living in the midst of an anti-racist revolution. It heartens my spirit to read those words written by a Black historian. We are not imagining that things feel very different right now and that change seems possible in a new way. Part of what is happening right now that is different from previous historical moments is that white people are learning and paying attention in a new way. White people are not the leaders of this anti-racist revolution, but our participation and support is a necessary and vibrant facet of this revolution. Finally, white people are following the lead of BIPOC leaders. BIPOC, by the way, means Black, Indigenous, and people of color. This is a term now in common use, so I want to make sure we all know it. It is meant to highlight the unique relationship to whiteness that Indigenous and Black African Americans people have, which shapes the experience of and relationship to white supremacy for all people of color within a United States context. So BIPOC, you will hear that, and you'll hear that again in a few minutes. So finally, white people are following the lead of BIPOC leaders. Finally, white people are learning the history that white supremacist culture does not teach, learning about the everyday racism experienced in BIPOC communities, and daring to imagine innovative and transformative solutions to the problems of systemic racism. All this feels good and important and meaningful. White people's commitment to anti-racism work is long overdue and very welcome. We need to know and understand that this work, the work of dismantling white supremacy, is not just social justice work, nor is it just intellectual work. It is also, for all of us, white people and Black, Indigenous, and people of color, for all of us, it is deeply spiritual, internal work. It is deeply spiritual, internal work, and we don't have a roadmap to follow. We are finding our way together. For many white people, guilt is an early hurdle we will face. And the discomfort of that guilt can be enough to keep many white people from committing to anti-racism work, choosing instead to dismiss white guilt as unwarranted rather than something real and to be wrestled with. But for those of us who don't shy away from this spiritual work, guilt will almost certainly be something we confront, particularly early in our anti-racism journey, confront, wrestle with, and have to make peace with one way or another. Anti-racism trainer and UU minister Bill Gardner identifies 5 different ways white people experience guilt. Feeling responsible or refusing to feel responsible for the sins of our ancestors, feeling guilty about racist acts, sins of commission, feeling guilty for not doing enough to stop racism, sins of omission, feeling the moral pain of benefiting from an immoral system, feeling overwhelmed by a sense of moral failure. Gardner notes that there is such a thing as healthy white guilt. He writes, theologian Reinhold Niebuhr observed, the conscience of a Christian should always be uneasy. He continues, I would say similarly that the conscience of a white anti-racist activist also should always be uneasy. But we have also noted the dangers of getting stuck in how we feel as whites, rather than how racism is destroying everyone in our racist society. A healthy white guilt keeps us focused on ending racism and not simply on our feeling bad about it. A healthy white guilt empowers us to see that the small steps we take, working persistently over time, can bring substantial change. End quote. I wanted to make sure to talk for a few minutes about white guilt because it's so common and so well known, sort of talked about in common everyday discourse. But what I really want to talk about today is grief. When Jim emailed me his update on the sermon topic, how his thoughts had shifted and evolved since February, I immediately thought about the grief that many of us will experience on this anti-racism journey. Not grief that white supremacy is being exposed and dismantled, I don't mean that. But grief that so much of our lives have been given over to lies, half-truths, and values that inflict harm on all of us. Grief and anger intertwined. Grief and anger that white supremacy culture has been allowed to inflict so much harm on so many for so long. It is okay to grieve. It is okay to feel angry. Jim shared with us today part of his anti-racism journey, the challenge and complexity of seeing more clearly than ever before that a beloved sport, a family tradition, an experience of fun, distraction, and shared joy is not separate from systems that have inflicted harm and continue to inflict harm. I too am a baseball fan. I too observe the ways in which the sport is a cog in a complicated machine that upholds capitalism, militarism, Christian hegemony, and yes, still racism. The start of the season was notable this year for many reasons, but one was the affirmation in various forms by all the teams that Black Lives Matter. There was initially a moment of exhilaration for us as fans. Look, all the New York Yankees and Washington Nationals knelt on the field at the start of the first game of the season before starting to sing the national anthem, and before standing to sing the national anthem, a show of unity in support of Black Lives Matter. And then it became clear over the next couple of days that all the teams were doing something, and that Major League Baseball as an organization was making a public relations move, affirming in a written policy that MLB stands in solidarity with the Black community in the fight for racial and social justice. MLB recognizes more needs to be done. MLB will continue to listen to the Black community, including MLB players, the Players Alliance, and MLB and club staff about this issue. Enhance initiatives to improve Black representation in baseball on and off the field. Expand charitable donations to social justice organizations, and continue to amplify the voices of our players. So on the one hand, this is better than doing nothing, right? If you told me last year that this would be happening this year, it would have seemed amazing. And I want to believe that it means something. But it also feels corporate and like a ploy. And the first day of the season was about Black Lives Matter, and then baseball went back to baseball as usual. Dismantling white supremacy culture will take more than large organizations issuing public statements of support for social justice. It does not feel like baseball is undergoing an anti-racist revolution. If we were dismantling white supremacy culture, and if baseball were undergoing an anti-racist revolution, then I don't think there would be a baseball season this year. It is a unique form of exploitation to pay athletes millions of dollars to risk their lives, to play sport during a pandemic for the entertainment of the masses. And I say that holding the complexity that I am one who is entertained. I think they shouldn't play, and I am watching every game my team plays. It is one of the few times of the day for me that life feels almost normal again. I dread hearing the news that more players have tested positive for COVID. I worry what will happen to those who are ill. I grieve that I am part of this system of high-stakes gladiator sport that may result in death for some who play. Being part of this culture is to be part of these systems. It is messy, it is uncomfortable, and it is hard.
Heard a lot of songs saying, "Where you going, my son?" Now I know they're true. Boy, you never stop to think how fast the years run. Now they've taken you. I remember you was 3.5. Your mom and me, we'd sit there after things got quieted. We laughed at some new word you said, how tough you were to get to bed, and we planned the night away, planning for our kid. I was your hero then. I couldn't do no wrong as far as you were concerned. You thought I was the best of men. The tables hadn't turned. You hadn't learned how little time it takes. And daddies make mistakes. Seems to me that lately I've been thinking a lot. Think about my dad. Lots of funny things come back I thought I forgot. Now they make me sad. High school that it used to be. I didn't want him touching me, and I shuddered if he did. Summer nights, baseball games beneath the lights, and sleeping in the car. My daddy and his kid. He was my hero then. He couldn't do no wrong as far as I was concerned. I thought he was the wisest and the strongest and the best of men. The tables hadn't turned. I hadn't learned how little time it takes. And everybody breaks. And daddies make mistakes. Heard a lot of songs saying, "Where you going, my son?" Now I know they're for real. Boy, you never stop to think how fast the years run, or the things they steal. Now it seems things I do and the things I never did. Why I work my whole damn life so I could give a better life than the one my dad could give me. I give it to my kid.
We shared our sorrows earlier in the service, and now it's time for our joys. If you have a joy you would like to share with the community this morning, you can share in the chat box. These won't be spoken out loud, so please feel free to respond to each other in the chat. This is the time for joy. And if we'll listen to music, and if you have a candle in your home you would like to light for joy, this is the time. our joys be multiplied. May we act to extend our warmth to all who are rejoicing in our wider world. The Sunday offering is an expression of the generosity that makes our congregational life possible. As Buddhist teacher Christina Feldman writes, generosity lies at the heart of spiritual practice. Extending generosity to ourselves and others gladdens our heart, is a direct way of healing division, and brings joy. Please text your donation to Chalice. If you haven't texted a donation before, know that once you text the amount, you'll get a reply with a link to follow to enter your credit card information. And once you've done that once, when you've donated, you don't need to enter it again for future donations. If your Sunday donation is part of your pledge payment, please be sure to indicate the word pledge after the dollar amount. And remember that you can make a text donation anytime. It doesn't need to be during the service. So the phone number will be on screen in just a moment, and I'll also put it in the chat box. Please give generously. Please join in dedicating our offering with words of affirmation. Open hearts, open minds, open doors, nurturing spirits, seeking justice within the wider world. This is our mission. You're invited to sing the hymn, We Begin Again in Love. There are spoken words and then a sung response. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. This morning, I invite you to sing as we reflect on the ways in which anti-racism work is messy and hard, and how if we approach this work with seriousness and commitment, we will nevertheless surely fall short at times. And our work then is to forgive ourselves and each other, and to begin again in love.
Forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For remaining silent when a single word would have made a difference.
Forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For each time our fears made us rigid and inaccessible.
We forgive
needs of others.
Forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For the selfishness that set us apart and alone.
Forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For falling short of the admonitions of the Spirit.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For losing sight of our unity.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For those and for so many acts, evident or subtle, that have fueled the illusion of separateness.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
Perfectionism is one of the characteristics of white supremacy culture. Perhaps it is perfectionist of me to feel dissatisfied with Major League Baseball's affirmation that Black Lives Matter. One of the symptoms of perfectionism is that little appreciation is expressed among people for the work that others are doing. Another is the tendency to identify what's wrong, with little ability to identify, name, and appreciate what's right. Perhaps the work of fans and activists is to hold Major League Baseball to its stated commitments. Either-or thinking is one of the characteristics of white supremacy culture. Perhaps I'm engaging with either-or thinking when I consider Major League Baseball's affirmation that Black Lives Matter, believing that baseball must be either all good or all bad, rather than honoring that they're trying to do something, willing to try and make changes. Plenty of fans were unhappy about their affirming that Black Lives Matter. Believing that I have a right to be comfortable is one of the characteristics of white supremacy culture. It is perfectly appropriate, when I think about it, that being a baseball fan feels messy and complicated and hard right now. I mean, shouldn't it? There is no aspect of our culture that gets to go unexamined. Nothing that's somehow sacred or separate from the mess of white supremacy culture. And I also want to name that when I list the characteristics of white supremacy culture, as I've done before, that list of things like perfectionism, sense of urgency, quantity over quality, worship of the written word, individualism, I want to name that for some of us, maybe for many of us, we hear in that list a list of things that we're good at. Many of us have learned to be highly successful in this culture of white supremacy. And letting go of those things, or daring to consider that there might be other values, other skills to develop, can seem scary and threatening. It is okay to grieve that too. We are talking about a revolution, an anti-racist revolution. It's a big vision we're undertaking. At the end of his article in The Atlantic, Ibram Kendi writes about the choices before us in the next election. And I want to end with his words, his admonition. One path forward leads to a mere restoration. Barack Obama's vice president unseats Trump, removing the bad apple from the barrel. With Trump dispatched, the nation believes it is again headed in the right direction. On this path, Americans consider racism to be a significant problem, but they deny the true gravity of the problem and the need for drastic action. On this path, monuments to racism are dismantled, but Americans shrink from the awesome task of reshaping the country with anti-racist policies. With Trump gone, Americans decide they don't need to be actively anti-racist anymore. Or Americans can realize that they are at a point of no return. No returning to the bad old habit of denial. No returning to cynicism. No returning to normal. The normal in which racist policies defended by racist ideas lead to racial inequalities. On this path, Trump's denialism has permanently changed the way Americans view themselves. The Trump effect is real and lasting. The reckoning we have witnessed this spring and summer at public demonstrations transforms into a reckoning in legislatures, C-suites, university admissions offices. On this path, the American people demand equitable results, not speeches that make them feel good about themselves and their country. The American people give policymakers an ultimatum. Use your power to radically reduce inequity and injustice, or be voted out. The abolition of slavery seemed as impossible in the 1850s as equality seems today. But just as the abolitionists of the 1850s demanded the immediate eradication of slavery, immediate equality must be the demand today. Abolish police violence. Abolish mass incarceration. Abolish the racial wealth gap and the gap in school funding. Abolish barriers to citizenship. Abolish voter suppression. Abolish health disparities. Not in 20 years, not in 10 years. Now. Please join in singing.
We are building a new way. We are building a new
closing words come from Martha Kirby Capo. Our time together is finished, but our work is not done. May our spirits be renewed and our resolve strengthened as we meet the challenges of the week to come. The chalice flame is extinguished until we light it again with the spark of our communion. Blessed be. A quick announcement. I want to make sure you notice that next Sunday is the blessing of the animals. I hope those of us with animals will be willing to be visible together to show our animals for the blessing. And there's also an invitation to send in a photo of your beloved but deceased pets that we'll put into a photo montage. So please look in the e-news or the newsletter for that information. You're invited to close our time together by singing the well. Newcomers are invited to stay here in this worship space for a newcomer chat, and everyone is invited to our coffee hour.